All right, guys, welcome to our DAT Booster presentation. We have a special guest with us today, the man, the myth, the legend, Feralis,
Hey,
or
brother.
his real name is Ali. And yeah,
Some
All
people
right.
are still connecting to the audio. I think we should give them a second to connect.
absolutely.
Pre-dental groups are so big now. I swear when I was in college, it was like there was like four people.
Yeah, we
I
have I think we have like 100, I don't know. I mean, like 400 people are signed up or something like that, but like we have like 100 people that signed the form, 100 plus like 160. It's a pretty large group.
Gotcha, gotcha. Damn, it's a big group.
yeah, competition. I think we should be good to start now.
Sounds good. Okay, Ali, I just made you co-host, so you can probably share your screen.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, is this I guess visible to everyone?
Yep.
All right, cool. So I'll get started. First of all, thanks for having me. I got a bit of a presentation for you guys. For some of you who have maybe already taken the DAT, this is going to be maybe kind of dry or repetitive. But for those of you who haven't or who are in the middle of studying or just started, hopefully you find this helpful. I'm here to talk about the American DAT, and I work with DAT Booster, and I'll get a little bit into what that is and what we offer. But first, what are we going to go over? And I apologize in advance, man. They put like a ton of animations on this presentation, so you're going to be seeing a lot of these. First, I'm going to just intro you to the test, tell you a bit about how to prepare for it, some tips and tricks, some stuff about us at DAT Booster and updates we have planned, and then a Q&A, and you guys can use this for any types of questions you have, even if they're not DAT related. So, introduction featuring me. My name is Ali Sarabi. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about myself. I got my BA in cell bio and neuroscience from Rutgers in 2010, but I didn't start dental school until 2016. So I had a bit of a gap. I was a non-traditional applicant. Sometimes people ask me, what did you do as an undergrad student? Did some volunteering, did some research, and I was the head of two student organizations. None of them were dental related. And as far as what I do for DAT Booster, I'm one of the lead content creators, DAT web expert. So if you guys ever use DAT Booster and you have a question about anything, like science related, you can just shoot us a question. I'll be one of the people who answers it. And of course, as I'm doing today, I'm one of the DAT presenters. All right. So I took the DAT in 2015. I scored a 28 academic average and a 30 total science. Average scores have gone up, but that's still a pretty decent score. When I was studying, I developed what's now known as Feralis Notes for Biology. I got kind of tired of, back when I was taking the test, you had to use like 3 or 4 different resources if you really wanted to cover everything in biology. And I said, I might as well just put this all in one place, and there's no reason to just, hoard it for myself when I'm done. I'd rather make it easier for other people. So I released those, I think even before I took the DAT, and people have found them helpful over the years. As far as dentistry goes, I went to Columbia University from 2016 to 2020. I graduated, and now I'm an orthodontic resident at Texas A&M, or as it's more commonly known, Baylor. So many animations. All right. A little bit about the booster prep team. As you can see, there's a lot of us. I would say the main people to look out for are Shawhead and Dave. Those are also the lead content creators, but there's a couple other people here you may recognize if you ever used Booster, in particular Nick, who does our biology videos. But as you can see, we're a pretty broad and diverse group of people. So let's get into what the American DAT is like and how to conquer it. So what is it? It's a 5-hour computerized standardized test, and anyone who's applying to dental school in the US is going to have to take this test. And it composed of 6 subjects, the PAT, which is like a visual sort of puzzle section, quantitative reasoning, which is math, and then reading, bio, general chemistry, and organic chemistry. Okay, that's not right. There we go. And this is the DAT 2020 program guide. It's always good to take a look at this just because it's the only real official guide to what outlines the test. Certainly doesn't really tell you anything that's actually on it. But if you ever have any questions about like how much time per section or whatever, it's a good place to look. And what you can see here is just a small screenshot of what the general format of the exam is. So you guys are going to take this test at a Prometric center on a computer, and this is more or less what it looks like. So what are the scores? How is it broken down? There's the total science, which is a composite score of your bio, general chemistry, and organic chemistry. You have 90 minutes here to answer 100 questions. 40 of those questions are bio, 30 are general chemistry, 30 are organic chemistry. Then there's a math section. You have 40 questions, but only 45 minutes. So you really got to be pretty fast with this section. You have a PAT section. That's the visual section. Here you have 90 questions and only 60 minutes. So as fast as you have to be for math, you have to be really quick for the PAT. And finally, you have your reading comprehension section. That's 50 questions, 3 passages, and you get an hour total to answer everything. So continuing the breakdown here, this is just sort of a more visual scale. As you can see, the bulk of your time is going to be spent on that science section. And the science section is not 3 individual sections. It's just one giant section. You're going to get access to all 90 questions at once, and you got 100 minutes for it. So as far as the scores themselves, the range of scores on the DAT is anywhere from a 1, which is just like your default if you didn't answer any questions, to a 30. That's like a perfect score or close to a perfect score. You don't necessarily need to get everything right to get a 30. What is actually considered a good score, though? Generally, we say a 20 to a 21. The average for accepted dental students now is somewhere around like a 20.5. So generally, you want at least a 20 in every section. If you can, a little higher than that. As far as percentiles go, these are not the most accurate. They're only from 2018, and the average keeps going up. But as far as percentile ranks go, a 21 is about 81.4th percentile, a 22 is 88.7, and a 23 is 93.8 percentile. Just to give you guys an idea of how much the scores have gone up over time, back when I took the DAT, 23 academic average was the 99th percentile. So things have certainly changed over time. These days, if you want to score in the top 1%, that's going to be around a 25 to a 26. The scores are given on a scale that's calibrated in advance, meaning it doesn't actually matter how people who took the test that day did. The scores are all preset, so it's just based on the number you got wrong. And most students who prepare with Booster have reported getting about a 22 plus throughout all the sections. Hopefully we keep that average high. So here's an example. When you take the test on test day, you don't have to wait for your scores. They're given to you right away. As soon as you hit that submit button, they show up on the screen, and you're given a printout. These are considered your unofficial score report. This is mine back from when I took it. And these are going to be your scores. Sometimes people ask me, does the score ever change between the unofficial and the official? And the answer is, unless something went really wrong on your test day, no. These are going to be your official scores too. And when you log in through the ADA website, you can also get a sort of breakdown of your scores. So most dental schools look at 3 important scores when they're looking at your application. The academic average is usually considered the most important. That is the average of all of the sections except for the PAT. There's the total science. That's the total of your bio, general chemistry, and organic chemistry. This is not an average. This is actually just its own separate scale where they figure out how you did compared to everyone else. And finally, the PAT section. And on all 3 of these, ideally, you want to score at least a 20 plus. Some dental schools also look at your reading comprehension score, which is about you again want to score 20 plus. As far as like, sometimes people ask me, what's the least important section? You don't want to do bad on any of them, but math tends to be considered not as significant. And none of the subjects should be below an 18. Anything below an 18 kind of can be a red flag for people in admissions who are looking over your DAT. So what can you do to get a high score? For a lot of you guys, you're in undergrad and at the same time, you're going to be studying for this test. So it's really tricky finding that balance between your schoolwork, because you want to keep your GPA up, and preparing for the DAT at the same time. I would recommend practicing daily. We do have a study guide on the website. Even if you don't subscribe, you still have access to the study guide. I really recommend checking it out. It's an intense 10 weeks, but it is designed to prepare you really well. Focus on the learning process rather than the practice scores. Sometimes people do bad on practice scores. They get upset or they get really anxious or worried. What's important is that you're learning from those mistakes. Predicting your actual score is really tough, but as long as you're learning from every practice test you do take, you'll tend to improve over time, and that's what matters most. And try to hone your test taking skills. And again, we give you some tips and tricks over time to sort of help you out with that. And complete every practice test, especially on our site. Our most recent practice tests are the closest to what's being tested on the DAT currently. So try to get through all of them, but you especially want to take the more recent ones. Sometimes people run out of time and they decide like not to take the last couple. I wouldn't do that in this case. So no resource is a golden ticket. I wish I could tell you like, yeah, use DAT Booster, you'll do great, but that's not true. You really have to put in the work to get a high score. That's the most important thing. More important than any other resource is how hard you study and how well you try to learn the material. There's no substitute for just really getting the concepts down, because you never really know what could show up on the exam, and the best way to prepare is to really make sure you've learned everything. With that said, we give you a variety of resources to make your work easier. So we want to streamline the process for you and make it as simple as possible to do well. Your scores will correlate with the amount of work you put in. Some people study for less and score higher. Some people will study for longer and still do worse. What's really important is the quality of the work you put in. You know, I'm sure you guys have all experienced this studying for college exams. It's easy to go to the library and spend all day there and not necessarily get any work done. The key to doing well is to actually focus and put quality hours in. So don't just, you know, sort of go through the motions. Make sure you're actually focused when you are studying. And if you're not focused, just call it a day. So what is our game plan? Early preparation. Again, you want to keep making sure your GPA is staying up while you're studying for the DAT. You don't want to tank that just to get a high score. I would say practice daily, especially the math, the PAT, and the reading. You don't have to practice for hours every day, but if you do a little bit each day, you'll be able to sort of maintain a fast speed. And that's really important for the DAT exam. Time is really of the essence. Content review. So that's going over the material, not doing practice questions, just reviewing. Ideally, you want to do this 2 to 3 times. By then, you'll really have hammered a lot of it home and your memory is going to be pretty good. And then finally, you start to get into practice tests. And that's where you sort of get a feel for how you're doing and what sections are weaker and what you really need to brush up and practice on. So tips and tricks. First one, PAT generators. So what is a PAT generator? There are some PAT questions that we handwrite, and those are the ones that we give you on the practice exams. But you don't want to run out of those, and you still want to practice every day. A generator is a sort of software-generated question, and there's an unlimited amount of these. So you can practice these as much as you want, and you don't have to worry about running out of these questions. So this is what we recommend for daily practice, and then you also have the practice tests in addition to that. So that was a generator for the angle ranking. This is what we call the keyhole, where you sort of try to pass the object through in a way that fits. And you'll get familiar with all of these with time. Tip number 2, PAT practice test. Try to get an answer in your head first without comparing it or getting help. Try to figure it out even when you feel like you're stuck. Systematically go through each answer choice and try to figure out why the ones that are wrong can be eliminated, and try to use basically process of elimination. And then we'll always go through with you guys in the answer explanations why things are wrong. And this is an example of how we do it, outlining with different colors or different proportions what's wrong with each question. And this probably looks super complex if you've never taken the DAT, but I promise by the time you're preparing, this will all make sense to you. Bio tests, breadth over depth. So bio is a section that I did really well in. And the thing I always tell students is that it's not too hard. Honestly, any question they give you on the DAT is probably easier than the questions you guys get on like your college exams. The tricky part is that they can ask you literally anything and everything. It could be from plants, it could be from ecology, taxonomy, it could be on genetics. So you just kind of have to be prepared for everything, but you don't have to know stuff in a crazy amount of depth. So like this is glycolysis. If any of you guys have taken biochem, you probably had to learn stuff to this level. But when you're actually taking the DAT, you don't need to know this level of detail at all. A more appropriate amount of detail would be something like this, really just knowing the fundamentals and knowing the basics, but making sure that you're not neglecting any one section. I see students do that a lot. Like they'll say, well, you know, I'm not really into studying plants and hopefully it just won't appear on my exam, but it can and it will. And you don't want to lose easy questions just by skipping things. Use mnemonics to study. So this is one we call Snowdrop, and that's using the different acronyms for remembering what tests identify what biomolecules. So Southern blot for DNA, Northern blot for RNA, Western blot for proteins. And that's something that does show up on the actual DAT, so be aware. And general chemistry. So round numbers whenever you can. You really have to get good at doing mental math and math on paper, because when you take the general chemistry section, you don't have access to a calculator. The only section where you'll get a calculator is the math section. So you have to be able to do math problems like these in your head. You have to be able to estimate with some accuracy. So be comfortable doing that and don't rely on a calculator as you're preparing. And that is more or less what I told you guys just now. So future updates. So we always try to roll out our updates strategically over time. We're always adding new stuff to our website. We're adding more and more science video lectures. I know that there's not a lot of those out there, especially for bio. So we're always trying to add new videos for you guys, because there are some sections that I personally thought like visuals help a ton, or being able to see a process helps a ton versus just reading about it. So we're always adding new videos for bio, for chem, for organic chemistry. Then we have our question banks and our practice tests. We're always adding new questions. So our question banks are questions that don't appear on our practice tests. So if you ever want additional practice in a certain subject and you don't want to have to worry about like, oh, if I take this question now and it shows up on a test, I'm only going to get it right because I remember it. Now you can practice with some extra stuff on the side too. And finally, our content, we're always reviewing our content. We're always replacing outdated questions, and we're always adding in the most representative questions on the DAT. I would say this is our strongest point as a resource. We're always keeping up to date with what's actually appearing on the DAT. There are a lot of other resources out there, and I won't name them, but they haven't been updated in years and years. They literally are using the same questions, and the DAT is constantly tweaking and adding new questions and recycling old questions, and we're always doing the exact same thing just to keep up with it. And I think that's something that you guys really want to make sure a resource you're using is doing, because you want to make sure that what you're seeing is actually going to appear on the test. And again, we have a lot more in the pipeline. We're always working on enhanced stuff for our PAT with the 3D visualizers. We're working on a new version of my notes with visuals incorporated, so that way it's a little less dry. And we're always doing webinar sessions where we answer questions or try to help you guys out with different tutorials. So we consider ourselves one of the most affordable and comprehensive resources on the market. I know that I think bootcamp is up to like $500 for a subscription. It's a lot of money, and I know that you guys are already paying a lot just to take the DAT and to apply to schools. So being able to keep things affordable is really important to us. Again, so we're a pretty affordable resource. We're very representative of what's on the DAT, and honestly, I do believe that we're a great resource to prepare with. I'm not just saying that because I work for Booster. I wish it was kind of around back when I prepared for the test, because it would have been a huge help. And we're always here to answer any questions you guys have. We don't charge you extra for a tutor or anything. If you're ever struggling with a concept and you guys message us on our intercom, we'll answer you right away. Most frequently asked questions that we get, our TFE generator. So we have generators for every section of the PAT except for this one, and it's something we are working on, but it's pretty complex, and we want to make sure that when it comes out, it's actually helpful for you guys. So that one is still in development, and it's either going to come out either this fall or early next year. The second version of my notes, we're still turning that out. We're constantly adding new chapters for that, but we should have a big update pretty soon. So for those of you who are starting to prepare, this is something you guys will be able to use. What if I have a question? As I mentioned, we're always available. We have the intercom system, so you just click on the little button in the corner of the screen, tell you about your question, and one of us will be able to answer you guys. And you deal with us. We don't outsource it to other students. It's always the people who are really making the content who answer your questions. So we're all pretty skilled at whatever subject we're answering. COVID-19 testing. So one thing we suggest you guys do, register early. Be prepared for the fact that you could get a last minute cancellation. A lot of students have. It's really rough to see. If you guys have an issue with this, message us. If you guys can show us that Prometric canceled your exam, we'll usually extend your subscription without any charge. So, let us know if something does happen and COVID interferes with your testing. And, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And I guess now is the time to ask any questions you might have about anything.
I just want to say thank you. I'll start the questions first. So how did you develop like the biology notes? Did you take all of those classes before and kind of like go from there? Or like how did that exactly, how did that
That's a
work
good
out?
question. Okay. So, when I was in college, I was a bio major. So I guess it might have seemed like this should have been natural to me. By the time I was studying for the DAT, I was out of college for like, I don't know, 5 years at that point. I'd forgotten everything. So I took research. I would go on like Student Doctor Network and I would read how people prepared who did well. And the problem is they all kind of use different stuff. Some of them use like Cliff's AP Bio. Some of them would use Barron's or Kaplan's or a textbook. So I literally went through all of those and I would make a set of notes. And then instead of making a completely new set of notes for every resource, I would just add information in if one resource had something that another didn't. So it kind of just kept ballooning up with different facts that I put in there. But that's more or less how it got made. I just kept going through different resources until I felt something was comprehensive enough to use on its own.
Nice. Okay, cool.
I have a question. So the DAT bootcamp notes, they have the 500 pages notes and they have the 120 pages notes. But this time, I was taking the bootcamp and I heard a lot of complaints about the bio section. And I actually got Booster. I mean, I created an account. I'm just waiting until, let's say, the new bio notes they come out. So I wanted to ask, like, does it cover everything? Because I know some people, they use DAT bootcamp notes plus the Romano, the 500 pages what the Romano has. So I wanted to see, like, once I start studying for the DAT, do I just go with the Feralis notes or should I do bootcamp and Romano, like some people do?
That's a good question. I mean, I try not to be biased and just tell people to use whatever I made. I would say check them all out and go with whichever one is more suited to your style. You will probably notice Romano's notes are a little more like if you have no intro to bio at all and you want something that is more like almost like a textbook style explanation, you could use that. Bootcamp has the two different versions. The longer one is sort of their solution to like if you're less familiar with bio, if you want lengthier explanations, versus their 120 pages, kind of a more compact form. And my own notes, I would say, are very compact. They're not very easy to read. If you were trying to learn bio for the first time, it would be difficult to use them. My suggestion, and this is what I did, was to read Cliff's AP Bio book. And I have a PDF version of it. If you guys ever need it, you can just message me and I'll send it to you. I would just read that. And then the compact notes are kind of what you use to memorize. But if you don't want to use Cliff's AP book and you still want a resource that can sort of work as a textbook that has lengthier explanations, I would probably go with Romano's over the bootcamp version, just because I think students have found a little more success with that. But we also try to keep ours as comprehensive as possible and include everything you might see on the DAT.
Thank you. I'm sorry, one more question.
Sure,
When
go ahead.
when is the new notes coming out? I mean, not the newer version, since I saw it on the website, but it didn't say when. Is it
That's a
gonna
good
come out in
question.
January?
So it's in the process of being written. We are, I think, this week starting to upload the chapters. But I would say it takes about a week for every couple chapters. So it's something that you'll see come out progressively. Different chapters will be rolled out. It won't be just like one giant release.
Perfect. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. Do you think the TFE generator will be ready by this summer?
You mean this coming summer?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I would be shocked if it wasn't ready by then.
All right, perfect. Thanks.
No problem.
I have a question.
Sure.
So what's the best way to prepare for biology? Let's say after reading Feralis notes or AP biology, like what is the best strategies to study for biology?
So here's what I would recommend. What ends up getting people on the exam, like I said, it's not because the questions are that tough. Occasionally you'll hear people say they phrase stuff very weird on the exam. That does happen. But most of the time, people just didn't memorize things. So stuff slips out of your memory. And even if the question is super basic, it gets forgotten. I think that spaced repetition is really important. And I think having a set of notes is really important. I say notes because I don't think it's an efficient thing to, let's say, for example, you decided to go use Romano's biology notes, and that's a couple hundred pages. It's not really efficient to go back and read a couple hundred pages several times. But if you have a set of notes that's more like outline format, very compact, that's something you could conceivably memorize if you put enough work into it. So I think if you do spaced repetition and you make an honest effort to memorize every chapter, and that's making sure you go back to earlier chapters and refresh your memory on those, then you can really commit everything to memory. I think that's how I was able to do well. It's not like I'm especially great at bio, or at least I wasn't back then, but I did take the time to memorize everything that was in my notes, and that is more or less the scope of the exam.
Little question kind of going off of that. So what would you say about like kind of like connecting concepts? Like, were you able to do that? Did that also help you, studying for biology or?
As far as connecting concepts, I mean, I wish I could tell you there were like connected concepts on the real exam, but there kind of isn't. The stuff they ask you is just like very discrete, specific questions. It's really just a matter of like, you know it or you don't. There's not a lot of critical thinking to it, which is kind of a good thing. It makes it easier.
Hi. When you were studying for bio, since it's so much content, how would you memorize? Like, you typed out your notes, and then how would you study it? Because sometimes people say that writing things out will help you memorize it, but since it's almost so much information, how would you memorize it?
So at the very beginning, what I would do is I think I had like a tablet, and I'd walk around with this tablet, and I would cover the screen with my hand, and I would just try to see if I could recall what was on the notes. Like there'd be a word there, let's say the word was, I don't know, mitosis. So I'd cover the definition with my hand, and I'd see if I could recall what the definition was. And if I couldn't, I'd, take my hand away, look at it, try to memorize it, put my hand back. And you end up doing this for like entire chapters. But eventually you get to the point, as intimidating as it seems, where you're able to recall most of that information. You just have to sort of go through and, without looking, sort of look at what the word is, but maybe don't look at the definition, and see if you can remember it on your own. Really force yourself to recall if you actually know what's there.
So you think typing out the notes and then just reading them over is an efficient way of memorizing?
You could type out the notes, but I wouldn't want to. That's like, even typing them out again would take an abundance of time. But if you are taking your own notes, you can. I mean, if that's how your method of recall works, if you really want to know if you can repeat something, if you have to type it out, I say go for it. For me, it was just all sort of in my head. I would just try to mentally recall the definition to things.
Okay, thank you.